And we will have, I'm sure we'll have another trickle in.
Okay, is this the clicker?
Yes, that's the clicker.
Okay, it looks different than the last time. Hello, can you guys hear me? I don't know. Did I do it right?
Loud and clear.
Wait, what?
We can hear you.
Oh, perfect. Okay. All right. So I'm excited to get started. Again, like Hunter said, I'm Courtney Nielsen, and I've been in the business since 2012. I started out, well, I was a teacher before I got into real estate. And in 2012, I started real estate, but I was really just doing it as a side hustle until I left teaching in 2016 and then started doing it full time. Ben has a little bit of a history. He has his, let's see, he is a general contractor and also our branch broker. So he worked for Woodside Homes for a bit, and that's where he got a ton of experience. He was one of their #1 sales agents in Saratoga. And after he did that for 3 or 4 years, then we're like, hey, why don't we just work together? So we've been teamed up since 2019. And some projects that we do. So he still builds. We just finished a spec home in Saratoga Springs. So bring a buyer. It's listed at 1.25, 5,000 square feet, 5 bedrooms, 3.5 baths. Anyway, look it up. So let's get started. So as you know, today we're going to be talking about making and receiving offers. We're going to spend a lot of time today on command and also in the MLS, looking at different forms, looking at different contracts. So we're going to be looking at a lot of the deals that I have done, or Ben and I have done, and the ones that are currently in process and past ones. So before we get started, just remember our, belief system. I'm sure you guys have gone over this a bunch of times, but I really think that when we are making and receiving offers, the belief system is what we really need to hold true to. The first one is win-win or no deal. We have a new agent in our office, and he has a client who's purchasing some land, and it's kind of been a long process, and his client hasn't been super cooperative, even though it's family, and they needed to extend the contract, and he was really worried about getting the extension, because originally the other agent said that they needed to do some hard earnest money in order to make it possible to get the extension, but they hadn't come through with some of their promises either, and so neither one of them were hitting the deadline. So anyway, he sent over a text of what he was going to say to the other person, and it was like a little, how do we say it? Yeah, very straightforward. and that's not bad. It was very frank. And you do want to be, open and straightforward. But anyway, we coached him through it to be a little bit softer and try to think of it more as a win-win situation rather than, you're not doing this and we're not. And so let's, so because you're not doing your thing, we're going to do this. And it's like, no. Let's turn this and look and take the positive spin. So every time you're negotiating, really think of, trying to spin it in a positive way so that both sides of the deal are winning. So another thing is integrity. Always do the right thing. I think that is important too. And we're working on another deal with another agent we're actually partnering on. And our client is purchasing a commercial building in South Jordan. And for this type of deal, we always think of, integrity is the #1 thing. And we want to think about, the client getting what they need and removing ourselves from it. Try not to have commission breath and think about the money. Instead, think about the person and what they're getting. And when you do that, you will win. Kind of along the same line, customers always win. We're committed. Communication is top priority. Being creative, teamwork, trust, equity, all of these things. So let's move on. So for our agenda today, and like I said, we'll be on command a bit, but this is basically our timeline or our outline for the day. So we're going to talk about the offer process, preparing the offer, writing the offer, presenting the offer, and receiving and responding, recaps, and how what did you learn today? So Gary Keller, some of the best agents I know love nothing more than a difficult negotiation that gives them a chance to really shine, to acknowledge objections, to discover a solution with which both sides can be happy. And it's true. Not all deals will be smooth sailing. In fact, Ben once, what did you say?
For construction deals?
Well, for construction deals, he says, do you want the mic so they can hear you?
Is there a mic?
Or that works. Yeah.
So I always say that new construction deals is somewhere between a wine vacation and a hip replacement.
Yeah, so it's really awesome and fun and exciting, and sometimes it's not very pretty. I learned this from another broker a long time ago. He talked about real estate deals sometimes like an airplane trip and a ride on an airplane, where sometimes you go through turbulence, it gets bumpy, and then we're back to smooth sailing, and then or I don't know how you say that, smooth sailing, smooth flying, I don't know. And then it gets bumpy again, right? But then in the end, we always land, or the goal is to land. So, all right. So the buyer makes an offer. The seller can respond in 3 ways. We can, and this is something that I explain to the sellers whenever I'm at my buyer consultation, because they say, well, what happens if we get an offer? Do we have to go with it? No, you have 3 options. You can counter the offer, accept the offer, or reject the offer. Typically, if we try to avoid the rejection and we try to, think of a way in which we can communicate with the other agent, communicate with our clients, and try to figure out a way that we can make it work. So sometimes that means we have to reject the offer in order to make it work. But that doesn't mean a rejection. And this is something that every agent should understand. A rejection doesn't mean no forever. It could just be no to this. And I'm not going to waste my time counteroffering because the offer was too low. So I'm going to reject it. You come back with another offer and maybe they can make a deal with that. So, yeah. So counteroffer, negotiation, accept. We just start the contract to close, and reject. It doesn't, again, don't assume that means no forever. So any ahas for that? It's pretty straightforward, right? Okay, so let's prepare the offer. So I'm going to jump onto, I keep thinking I need to go to my laptop, but I don't. So let's go to command. Oh dear. How do I move that? Here, let's minimize this maybe. Okay. So when I go to write up an offer, I'm going to go to the forms, but I'm also going to command. If you don't have your client in your command, then you need to do that first off. So over here, let's see. How well do we know command?
I'm not using command, we use riveting.
Okay.
I am Blaze assistant.
Oh, awesome.
So,
Okay, perfect. So
but do you know command well?
you're learning. Okay, what about the people in Zoom? Have you guys used command much yet? Technically, every deal that goes through command or to get paid, you have to put it into command anyway. So whether you're using it to get leads or whatever, you still need to know how to put it into command to get paid. So the first thing that you're going to need is you need to add a contact. And so you can just go right over here. So you click on the little person on the left, that's contacts. You come over here, add a contact. Sally Smith, right? We'll just add her. Oh my gosh, can't spell.
You can do Smite.
I could do Smite. We know some. Okay, we're gonna add in her husband, John Smith. Okay, add. We're gonna put in their email. Okay, I have longer nails than I normally have, and I can't type anymore. I was like, oh, I think I'll follow that trend. And okay, I'm just making up this. Maybe I should put something here so I know it's not somebody real. Fake. Enter in a phone number. Okay. I always put where the lead source comes from. So because I like to know, was this a referral? Was it somebody in my sphere? What did another agent refer it? Just so I know. And then you're gonna put who it's assigned to. So in this case, we'll put it for me. Is there anyone else that we have to collaborate with? So I'm gonna add Ben and then create. So that's just the basic info that you need in Command. All right, so then once you've added in the person into Command, then you're gonna go over here to opportunities. And look, there aren't any opportunities, but we need to create one. So we're gonna create an opportunity.
Are you under contract right now?
Yes, I am under contacts right now. So I think the best way, and you can go straight into opportunities and create an opportunity, but I've found that the best way is to go to the contact first and then put in the opportunity. So we're in contacts, we're on Sally Smith, we're gonna go to opportunities here, create opportunity. So what kind of opportunity is this going to be? It's gonna be a listing, let's say. We can add the co-seller, which is going to be your husband, and create it. Maybe. What am I missing? Why isn't it going? Oh, we have to put in the commission. So, okay, we're going to put 3%. And then down here on assignees, I like to add in Ben also. So because Ben and I are a team, but we also have a team, just everything that Ben and I do, we both collaborate on it. So we both want to make sure we're both receiving the emails and are updated on it. And that's why we do that. Okay, we're going to estimate close date. Let's do, they need to close by May 31st. Okay, we're actually going to be in appointment stage, scheduled. So we're going to go on a listing appointment. Okay, create. All right, now we've created the listing. So now I can either click on this link and that will take me to opportunities, or I can go over here and click the opportunities. And now I've got Sally's in my appointments. And then, okay, we're going to do that. So I'm going to jump over, let's see.
So
One.
you do this before you go talk to the customer? Or?
Do because I like to have everybody into my command or into my database. And that the reason for that is even if you go to the listing appointment and say they don't take you, they don't choose you as their agent, you've got their information in your database and you can continue, sending them newsletters, postcards, you can set them up in your 36 touch program that you have in order to contact clients. I just think it's a good way because maybe they're not going to use you this time, or maybe they're just kind of filling out the market and they're not sure if they want to list right now, but maybe they'll list in a couple of months. Some people have I've gone on a listing presentation and, at the end of it, they're like, oh, we're not going to get quite as much that we want out of our house. So maybe we'll just stay, but we'll think about it in a year. And unless you're keeping tabs on them or continually following up or keeping yourself top of mind with them, then when it comes a year later, they could choose somebody completely different, just not because they didn't like you or didn't want to work with you, but just because you didn't follow up with them. So I put them into my database. So let's go to, should we do, okay, let's jump to my niece. Is that not letting me? Oh, hold on. Oh, right here. Let's jump to their file because everything's in and it's my niece and we're good. in looking at actually, this is new construction. Shoot, no. Oh, let's go to let's go to ours, Ben. Oh, that's new construction. No. Yeah.
We got a bunch of new construction.
Okay, let's go to. Sorry, we'll go to one of our listings.
Closed.
Yeah, one that's closed.
Why don't you do my year?
Here, I'm going to do us. Okay. What? Okay, how about we go address search. All right, so this is one of our houses that we sold a few years ago. So once you're in and you have, or actually let's go back to the seller profile. So you do want to put in, or actually details, you want to go, you want to put in who the sellers are. So that was Ben, me, we're closed. This, you have to put in the address because in order to send it to get paid, you have to put in the address. All right. So go to documents. You're going to have your listed documents. So you have to have, what I love about Command is that everything is in here what you need, like what's required. And then there's some other documents that are conditional or extra. Okay, so anything that is required, you have to have when you're going to a listing appointment. So you have to have your exclusive right to sell agreement. You have to have our ERS disclosure addendum. Okay, so some of these documents are not found in utahrealestate.com. Some of them are found on our KW Westville website. So this one is one of those. You have to put in the MLS input. You have to put in your wire fraud, scam alert, and then you have to put in your MLS active and your seller's property disclosure or conditions. Okay, you have to put in all of those. Those are required. Anything else is just an extra form that you may or may not need to use. So when we were doing, yeah, that's good. Okay, so let's go over to the MLS. All right, in the forms on the MLS is where you're gonna find your documents that you absolutely have to have. I usually just fill them out through the MLS and then save them as a PDF and then upload them into Command. Or I usually don't upload them into Command until after I've gone through DocuSign with it because you have to have that anyway. But okay, so you're going to need your exclusive right to sell, not the short sale, obviously. You're going to need this one that is the designated agency form. So fill that out. You're going to need that one. Okay. All the other ones are on here. So the other one is for the listings. Okay, so I have a listing coming up. So let me just show you when you can fill in the details on the MLS, and then you can, after you've filled it in, okay, after you filled it in, then you go over here to print PDF, and then it's already filled out. You save it as a PDF, and then you can put it right into your DocuSign. So that's a really, I didn't learn this surprisingly until like, I don't even know, a couple years ago. I don't know what I was doing all those years, but I was like, what? You can do a PDF of everything that you filled in. So what I like to do is I like to just take my laptop with me to the listing appointment. If they're like, yeah, let's go, let's do it now. Then I like to just go through the MLS, fill it out online, do the PDF, drop it into your DocuSign, and you can send it to them to fill out right then. Okay? Or to sign, I mean. Okay, so the other forms are on here. So your wire fraud can be found on here, but we also have those on KW Westfield. So the brokerage website is kwwestfield.com. You guys, I'm sure, have been here, but you're going to go to your agent resources. You're going to scroll down to important documents. And you are going to need, you're going to need this one right here. This is the BBA ERS required disclosure addendum. So this is one that is specific to Keller Williams Westfield that you have to have with every listing. Maybe you already know this, but I think it's a good review. You download that, and this form right here is basically the disclosure form that lets buyers and sellers know that KW Westfield owns some different affiliated companies. So we have a lender, we have a title company, we have an insurance company. And so even if you're not going to use any of those affiliates on this transaction, you still have to disclose that we have affiliates, okay? So this is just an easy one that you need to grab from KW Westfield's website. Another one, okay, so we have the wire fraud documents here as well. So if you're at KW Westfield, the main brokerage, it would be this one. If you're at the Cedar Valley branch, you would click on this one. If you're at the Excellence branch, you would click at on that. So they're each specific. And you can do this through the MLS too. It automatically fills it out. But if you want it here, you know, if you just want to grab it from here, it's already filled out for you. And then you just have to throw it into DocuSign. So you have to have that one for both buyers and sellers. Okay, so if we're representing a buyer, you have to have one additional form. And I believe there's one on the MLS as well, but I think this one is a better form. Actually, there's a couple of them that are that Dean wants you to use because he's already approved the form, and so you don't need the principal broker signature on some of the forms. Whereas if you go to the MLS to get the forms, then you would need his signature. So not for this one, but if you are representing a buyer, then you are going to need the for-year protection. This is the home inspection one. So make sure you grab that. And what I like about it is everything's nice and clean and summarized on this one form. The one on the MLS is like, I don't know, it's kind of confusing a little bit, but it's really easy. take that and send that. So this just tells them, you know, it's a really good idea to get a home inspection. It isn't done automatically. We have to let our buyers know that they have the option to get one, and these are the reasons why we want them to get it. Okay, and then another one from the KW. Doesn't like me. Okay, is this change addendum? Okay, so if you need to make a change, so say you're going to change the listing price, or you're going to extend the listing to a longer date, then I like to use this one because the one online, you need Dean's signature, but this one you don't. So if we go to the ERS change addendum, then it's really easy. This is how you change your agreement, and it just has, see, it has your signature here, so you don't have to send it over to Dean and get his signature too. He's already approved this form, and so it's really great. Anyway, I love it because if you're going to change the price, it's really easy. You just click the box. If you want to extend it, click the box. If you need to change the status or to cancel, or if you're going to cancel it, you have to use a cancellation termination ERS doc. So it's right there clear. If there's anything else that you want to add to or change in the remarks, anytime you make a change on the MLS, you have to get approval from the seller. You can't just go on the MLS and just make changes. So everything has to be approved. And if there's any other details that you want to put here, then you would want to do that. So this is one that you may or may not need to use, but you need to know that it is accessible right on KW's. I would explore, oh geez. How do I move this? Oh, okay. Thank you. I was like, this is so dumb. Okay, I would just explore around here and just look at all of the different docs that are on the website so that you know what's available. There's also what I think when you're going to go write an offer, we do have transaction checklists right here, which it's a great, even if you just print it off for your reference, you know, to have.
Which, by the way, that transaction checklist matches the
Yeah.
KW command
Right.
Format for inputting your document.
Yes, so this matches command so that you won't go through, if you're needing to upload your documents later into command, you'll have them all here if you just follow the checklist. So you have your buyer checklist. These are all the documents that you're going to need when you're making an offer. And these are all of the documents that you're going to need when you're taking a listing and taking a, and you're under contract review or accepting an offer. Okay, so let's go back and let's write an offer. All right, so where's the offer? Real estate purchase agreement. There you go. Okay, real estate purchase contracts. So let's go right here and we're just gonna go through the important things that you're going to need when you're writing an offer. So usually before I even get to this point, I will have a conversation with my buyer and I will say, okay, you know, what do you want to offer? And before I do that, we'll look at some comps too. I think it's always a good idea on any property that you're going to put an offer on because it helps your buyer to you know what the market is doing, and if they like want to put in a really low offer, then you can say you would have to be able to go in if you do a low offer and have valid reasons why you're submitting a low offer. So I think it's a good idea to pull comps before you even write the offer. So if they say, hey, we want to put an offer, then say, okay, you know what? Give me an hour. I'm just going to go and quickly review the comps for this. And let's, you know, jump on a call afterwards and we can review those comps so that we can make sure that it's priced accurately and it would help you have a good idea of what to offer. Okay, so when you're gonna offer, what are some other things that you're gonna need? We don't have a board to write on today. I don't know where that went. But what are some things that, I think it's in the equipment room or in that room, yeah. Oh yeah, maybe they're using it. All right, why don't we just jump over to here. All right, well, let's do this. Okay, so when we're having this discussion with our client, we're saying, okay, we need to know a few details before we go and write the offer. So what are some of the details that we need to know right up front? Well, we need to know how much we're going to offer, right? So we need to know what we're going to offer, purchase price. Okay, what are some other things that we need to know? What's at the very top of the rep sheet?
Just money. Just saying.
Thank you. Thank you. Okay, yes, we need to know earnest money. Where'd it go? Oh, okay, earnest money. So we need to have the conversation about earnest money. If you haven't already had it, right? Okay, how much earnest money are you going to want to do here? And you need to make sure that they understand that earnest money is not additional money that they're paying on top of the purchase price. This is just money. Oh, thanks. This is money that can be credited towards either closing costs or the purchase price or their down payment, however they want to do it. But it's not extra money, okay? What are some other things? So we have price, earnest money. Yeah, dates are important, okay? So we need to know, going back to our contract, okay? Scroll down. Oh my gosh. This is like not my friend here. Okay, so we need to know what our contract deadlines are going to be. So we have the seller's disclosures. So SPCD, we need to know when we want our due diligence, our financing and appraisal, and our settlement, right? Okay, so for a typical contract is 7 days from acceptance, 14 days, 21 days, and 28 or 30 days, like that, okay? Takes about a month to go through the whole process. Now, a lot of sellers don't really want a really long due diligence period. So if you do this and put those dates in, they may count back. But I always think it's a good idea before we do anything or before we decide what these dates are, call the other agent and have a conversation with the other agent and say, hey, we're thinking about submitting an offer. What are some things that are important to your client besides price? You know, are there any specific dates? When do they need to close by? How quickly do you want their due diligence to be? Is there a certain amount of earnest money that you're expecting? Because in the old days, when I first got started into real estate, a $500 or $1,000 earnest money deposit was typical, right? That's not the case anymore. People want more money for earnest money because they want you to see that you are committed. You've got some skin in the game. So an average amount that I've been telling clients is at least 1%. Okay. 1% is what I kind of use. Now this changes if it's a luxury product. So say you're building or you're buying a house that's like $1 million. Would you, a lot of sellers don't think $10,000 is like enough for $1 million, or at 1.5 or $2 million. They're going to want to see a little bit more. So that's why talking to the listing agent is really important, so you know what they're expecting. that could be anywhere from like $20,000 to $30,000 is probably what you're going to want to put for an earnest money deposit on a more luxury product. So again, remind the client, it is refundable unless you've done unless you've done hard earnest money as part of your agreement, right? But you at least have until the due diligence deadline to get the money back for any due diligence items. And then if they can't get their financing at the end, then you could cancel for finance reasons and get your money, right? So a lot of buyers, I think 2 weeks is a little long. If I were the listing agent, I would be like, ooh, it's kind of a long time for them to, change their mind. We want them to be locked in as soon as possible and to get their inspections done as soon as possible, because we don't want to waste time for our seller in case they do cancel. We want to get back on the market as soon as possible. So I usually like to shorten this up, and I like to do like minimum 3 to 5 days here. Like, really, why do they need 7 days to get you the seller's disclosures? The only thing that you do need a little bit of time on is to get the title, right? So the PR. And it does take like a couple days for the title company to get you that. And that's why, to speed up the process, it's good that once you get the listing, you contact the listing company and you open escrow as soon as you get the listing, and you don't wait until you get a contract before you open escrow, because they can pull the title report as soon as you get it listed. They've got it, and the only thing that they have to do is edit it to add in the buyers when you get a contract, okay? So if, though, you forgot, you're like, oh, shoot, I have to just send it to title now. We got a contract. That's okay. It's not the end of the world. But you do need to have at least, I would give yourself a minimum of 3 business days so that you have time to get that title report. Because I was doing a contract, walking through it with one of our new agents in our office, and she did not understand. It was a new thing. Go back up to section, kind of jumping all around. I hope that this is making sense and you're following me, right? Tell me if I'm going too fast or, okay, so section 7 is the seller's disclosures. So if you're representing the seller, as part of the seller's disclosures, you have to provide as many of these as possible that apply. So if it applies to all of the letters A through K or A through L, then you need to provide every single one of those documents, right? If it doesn't apply, then you don't provide it because it doesn't apply, right? So like, look, let's go down these. So A, the written seller property condition disclosure. So a lot of people think, and I even thought this when I was a new agent, I didn't realize that even though I went to school, I should know this, right? But you don't know it because so much information is going in your brain all at once. So you kind of don't retain everything all at once. So your seller property disclosure document is not the only thing that you have to give them as part of the seller's property disclosures. Okay, you have to give them, if the property was built prior to 1978, you have to include a lead-based paint disclosure and acknowledgement, which you would find in forms. You have to provide a commitment for title insurance. So every deal has to have the commitment. That's this. Okay. And then if it's in an HOA, and sometimes if it's not an HOA, some communities still have CC&Rs. If they don't have an HOA dues, they might still have CC&Rs. So a copy of any CC&Rs, rules and regulations affecting the property. And so to get those, you have to have the conversation with the seller. Hey, I need you to log in to your online portal and I need you to pull off these documents. So you need to get the CC&Rs, and then you're also going to need a copy of the most recent minutes, budget, and financial statement. Okay, all of these should be in the online portal for their HOA. Now, if say they're old school and they've never got a login to their online portal, and they're like, they don't know. So then the actual homeowner needs to call the HOA and they have to get the documents, because if I call as the realtor, they're not going to give me the documents because I'm not an owner, I'm not part of their HOA. So you have to get the seller to get them. Now, sometimes the title company pulls those for you as part of the title report because they are recorded documents. And so they'll pull those, but they won't be able to get the financial, right? So that's where you really have to get your seller to get you all of those information. Now, not all HOAs follow the rules in that they don't have a meeting every month or whatever, or a lot of them, I think it's not that they don't follow the rules, it's that you have to have so many people, right, there in order for a meeting to happen. So I guess they are following the rules. But there may not be minutes like from last month. They may be minutes from a September meeting, and that's the last meeting that they've had. Okay, that's okay. You just get the most recent minutes. If it looks like they've had, meetings every month, like on schedule, then I would say the last 2 or 3 months meetings would be good. Minutes would be good. The budget and financial statement. So they're going to want the budget for the year. And then also they're sometimes called the profit and loss statement. That is the other financial documents that you're going to need. Okay. Any long-term tenant lease or rental agreements, if it's not leased out, then you don't need to worry about that one. Any copy of short-term rental bookings, again, if you're not using a part of your house as an Airbnb, you don't need to worry about that. A copy of any existing property management agreement, if you don't have that, skip it. Evidence of any water rights. So this applies in, more bigger properties that might have water shares that come with the property. So if they do have those, then you need to provide the water certificate. And how you find that is you go to I'm blanking. Oh gosh, come on. Utah. What? Here, I can't remember what the site is, so let me just Google that. Utah Division of Water Rights. Okay, so you go to Utah Division of Water Rights, and if sometimes your client already has like a certificate of it, or they know what their water share number is, but a lot of people don't know what that is. So what you would do is you would search. So you'd go to water rights, and you can search. Okay, so I have a client who has water rights. So I'm going to put Signaler. Okay, Glade and Michelle. All right, so this is what it looks like. So you would need to print this off or make a PDF of it, which you can do that. So you just go to print, it brings it up in this format, and then you can save it. So you need to provide that as one of the seller's disclosures. Okay, and then seller disclosure. Okay, if it's a foreign investment, then you would need to provide some additional tax documents for that. I have never dealt with that, but maybe you're a client and you have a lot of Asian buyers, and so you might deal with this. So that would be something, I don't know about that one. And then any other things that you would need. So in some cases, Maybe it's a new construction, but you're not using the new construction contract. So maybe you put in there that you want a copy of the building plans or something like that. That would be something that you could put for other. Okay, so you got to give yourself time to get all of those documents, and most of the legwork for those documents needs to be done when you're getting the listing. Okay, all right, due diligence deadline. What do you guys think would be a good timeline for that? A reasonable timeline.
Well, to me, I've always thought. So I've always believed that if the seller has 1 week, about 1 week to do their seller property disclosures, then I think 1 week is good for a due diligence period.
Right, because they can't fully do their due diligence without your seller's disclosure. So you're doing 5 days, and I usually like to give 5 days. So 10 days, okay? I feel like that's reasonable, and it could even be tightened up even more. Some people, to be really awesome and amazing, they'll have the seller's property condition disclosures, the title report, everything already, and they send it over to them with the contract signed. So that could speed up the whole process, and you could, speed up all of this if you needed to. So the due diligence, they're going to need to do a home inspection, right? And we need to give a reasonable amount of time for them to get a home inspector in, and then get the report back, have time to review it, come up with their list of items or repairs that they need done. So generally a home inspector can get in with that, they can get in pretty quickly. I know post to pillar to post here, I've never had an issue with them getting in really quick. It's usually within a couple of days. So, but I think it's reasonable to do 21 days. You could tighten that up as well if you wanted to, but that's pretty reasonable to get your financing and appraisal. And then from financing and appraisal, you're going to need a minimum of, is it 3 days or 4 days? 3 to sign, right? I usually give it a little bit of a buffer though, just make it reasonable if you want to get in 28. But if the seller's like, hey, I got to get out of this house, we need to close in 21 days, it's possible. You just have to call your lender and say, how fast can you get a loan done? The quickest amount of time that I've ever gotten a loan done, I think is, the regulation for it is 7 days, and I've done it. One of my lenders has done it. Usually, though, I would say 10 days is a good, like if a lender has to speedy do it, they can do it in 10 days is like really fast. That's really pushing it because they have to get the appraiser in. Sometimes the appraisers are backed up. So then you have to pay more money to get a rush appraisal and all the things. It can be done quick. 14 days is even a little bit better, but if a lender usually can get it all done in 21, that's very reasonable. Okay, so we need price, earnest money, dates, what else? As you're going through the house and your buyers are like, oh, I really, really love this bookcase. Can we include that? So that's happened where, I actually bought the bookcases for my house. We bought a model home and the house needed the 2 bookcases that were flanking it. So that was part of our offer, is to include those. Okay, but most of the things that you're going to ask to be included are your typical things as fridge, washer, and dryer, right? So those are 3 main things that are either going to be included or excluded. Now, the seller may have on the MLS listed that the fridge, the washer, and dryer are all excluded from the sale, but it's still negotiable, right? So if you really want the washer and the dryer and the fridge, then you can ask for it. And you would just put it in either the addendum, or you would put it in this section right here. Wait, right here. 1.1. So you click in the buttons, like all of these things come with the house. You don't need to list out. I think it's good to know this, you know what's included, especially like we had a dispute over a fence. When was that? Last year? Last year, yeah. So the whole property was fenced, but there was a goat pen that it was a 5-acre property. There was a goat pen with a little like lean-to portable goat structure. And that was not attached, and it was just like put in with a post like that you could just take out really easily. It wasn't like cemented or anything in. Yeah, it was just staked in, and it was just like, I mean, it was like a lean-to kind of ghetto shed. But so when the sellers went to leave, they packed up all their stuff because they were taking their animals and their goat pens. And then the buyer came on the property. You know, he actually was traveling, so he didn't get there right away. When he got there, he's like, wait, what happened to the goat pens? So in the end, I was the listing agent, and that's where I made a mistake. I should have been more clear here that in the exclusions that was excluded, the goat pen, but it wasn't. And so the buyer's agent and we split the cost of whatever the goat pen would have costed. I think it was like $1,000. So we both 500. We're done. And we had another agreement signed or filled out where, you know, they took $1,000 for damages, I guess, whatever. But so this is why it's really important when you're at a house. And even though, actually, I think it was in the notes it was excluded, but it was in the pictures. And it made it seem like it was all included, but it wasn't. And the chicken coop wasn't included either, but then he wanted it, and so they left it. And all of those things on the property seemed like it was all there, but we needed to spell it out that the temporary fencing was excluded. So this is where you do it. You can do it right here in 1.2, or you can put it on your addendum to the rep sheet. Okay. And I've been more diligent, I would say, as an agent since then with every seller. I ask them, I specifically say, of all the things on your property, what's included and what is excluded. And we go through every little item. I pay attention to all the details on the property so that we don't make that mistake again. And the sellers couldn't return it because they had already, like, their son had taken it over to the Westlake ag farm. And then from there, it was his goat pens. It wasn't even the sellers. It was just the son's. So he sold it. And so it wasn't even anything that we could return or bring back. All right. Another thing that we need to know as we're writing the offer is if there are water shares, are they being transferred with the sale? Now, this is another thing that you need to know. Water shares are not transferred through the title company. Okay, you have to fill out a separate transfer form from the water division. So if that isn't done, then you could lose the water right after so many years. This actually happened to one of my clients recently. So I went to this listing. It just sold last week. And this gentleman had lived in the home for 30-something years. Okay, the whole time that he lived there, he thought he had water shares. And he did until 2017, when the water division went through an adjudication process where they took back the water right. Now, they didn't take it back. What happened was they had to claim that it was theirs. So they it was like legal forms. It was like he was getting served, you know? It looked like that kind of a document. And it said that he had to report by a certain date that he had this water share. So at the sale, 30 some odd years before, the water share was never transferred to his name. And so I mean, that was like a long time later, like 25 years later, the state was like, oh, what happened to this? You know, they tried to reach out to the original owner. She's probably long dead because the seller is like 80. So, yeah, so she's probably long dead. But I don't know what happened. He's blind, and I don't know if when he went blind, if it was just recently or whatever, but he may not have ever read the documents or whatever. But anyway, he lost his chance. They sent him several notices. I think there are like 3 or 4 different notices to claim it. He never did, but they still have been using it. And no one's ever said anything. There's like a well, like a little like fake rock, you know, like over the well where like they've been using it to water their backyard for all these years. But anyway, it's not being transferred with the new owner because they don't own that water right. So that's something that you have to put in here. So you go to the water right division, you find the number. This is the code 25-10720 is the share number that you would put on the water service.
Very similar to the tax ID number, they're associated.
Yes, it has its own ID, and it has to be now. Yeah, so the title company is not going to take care of the transfer, but it is in the document. So it says you do have to prove to the water division that you've, purchased it, and so you do need to put it into the contract so that when you go to apply for the transfer, you have proof that you own it now, right? Okay, another thing going back to, then you brought up a really good point. So when you're putting in the property address, if it's been listed on the MLS, Dean really likes you to do this. Okay, so I don't know where that came from, but okay, so he likes you to put in the address and the MLS number on the property line so that there's no discrepancy of which property is. In addition to, you have to put in the tax ID number for that property. So if you don't know how to find that, I'll show you in just a minute how to do that. But we're still going over other things that we need, right? So we need the purchase price. As we're looking at purchase price, we need to know what type of loan is it going to be. We're not going to put it on this form necessarily, but if it's an FHA loan or a VA loan, you do have to fill out an additional addendum form for FHA financing. So we need to know that. These details right here, they don't have to be exact. You just need, the purchase price has to add up to an exact number, but these details here, like these can change. So we just want to give an estimate. So I say, okay, seller, how much money are you planning to put down? And they tell me 10%. Well, when they go to do their financing and their lender says, it would be better if you did 5% and you take that extra money that you have and you pay off these things, right? You don't have to fill out anything and provide that information to the seller later. We're just telling them up front, hey, I've got 10% down. How the lender decides to allocate that is up to the lender and the buyer. So it is good here to show that you have money because if it's a multiple offer situation, the sellers are going to look at that. They're going to say, well, how much is this person putting down? Well, how much is this person? Okay, well, are they getting an FHA loan or are they doing conventional? What, they want to know all of those details because that could make a difference on appraisals. It can make a whole bunch of things. A stronger offer is the more cash, better, right? Okay, so if you're putting in property, we'll say we're buying a 500,000. Okay, we're doing 5,000 earnest money. We're not going to do additional earnest money as it states later in the contract. The new loan is going to be, we're going to do 10% down. So the new loan is going to be 450. And
Actually,
no, I'm going to use the earnest money as part of that. 50,000, right? Is that right? Did I do that wrong? Yeah, 455. You're right. Oh, 45. Right? Okay. Purchase price 500,000. Okay. And some people like to put the period in there and the comma so that you know. Anyway,
So that would be 45,000.
45 plus 5 is 450 plus 50 is 500. Right? Okay, so this number right here and this number 445 and 50,000 could change because your lender says, I want you to pay off this car. So we're going to, because in order to make it work financially, it's better for them to not have a car payment. So they could pay off a car and then put $30,000 down or whatever. But you still need to spell this out and show it. Okay, the second thing that we need to know when we're filling out the offer is whether or not the property is conditioned upon the sale of the buyer's home. Okay, the seller needs to know that. Okay, so other things that we're going to ask, do you have another home that you need to sell? So is there a contingency? If so, then you need to have the conversation with the buyer and say, okay, we got to get your house listed as soon as possible because the seller's going to want to see that you're putting it up on the market, right? And they love even better if it's under contract. Okay, the next point that we need to know is possession. This is another negotiating point. Sometimes on the MLS, they tell you, well, it says every time on the MLS, how many days the seller wants before they turn over possession. The average is like, I would say 1 to 3 days. And because the seller has to move, they're not going to want to move before their house is closed, right? And the buyer wants to get in as soon as possible. So the nice thing to do is to give them, we want to give them at least 24 hours. I would say you're being really generous, 48 hours. So I always like to close. This is something that I like to do. I like to do settlement on either a Wednesday or a Thursday, and then give possession so that it lines up so that my buyer can move in on Saturday. That's what I like to do. So you have to kind of adjust the date. So if settlement is on Thursday and we know that it's going to actually close on Thursday, then it starts counting from when it's been recorded and funded, right? So possession, 24 to 72 hours. If you're going to do longer than that, then you may want to consider a lease back. So this is another form that you would need to know if you're going to do a longer, like I have a house closing on the 30th of March and the seller needs a 1-month lease back. So we need to fill that out as an additional, a short-term lease back, okay? Other things, let's go in here. All right, the prorations, special assessment. Who is going to pay for this? This is another thing that you need to ask when you're sitting down with the seller at the listing appointment and they're like, yeah, we're gonna go with you. Okay, well, we need to know a couple of details. We need to know, is there an HOA transfer fee? Or it's also called a reinvestment fee, okay? Some neighborhoods, like in Saratoga Springs, the SSOA is 0.5% of the purchase price. That's a lot of money. Who's gonna pay for that? Like I have a client who's selling a house in the SSOA and they're buying a house in the SSOA. One house is being sold at like $980. The other house is 1.3. Okay, 0.5% of 1.3 is $6,500, right? That's added to your closing costs. So who's going to pay for that? So usually when I'm representing the buyer, well, we're going to ask the seller to pay for it most of the time, unless there's a multiple offer. If there's a multiple offer, then we reevaluate the situation, right? So you have to put here who's going to pay for any special assessments would be like, okay, say it's a townhome or condo community and they're going to re-roof the building and there's not enough money in the reserves to pay for it. So they're going to give all of the members of the community, they're going to charge them $500 each. That's a special assessment that has to be paid this year. Or like in my mom's neighborhood in St. George, they like resurfaced all the roads in the neighborhood. Well, where's that money coming from? So they actually charge the residents a certain amount of money to pay for all that. So that's a special assessment. Who's going to pay for that? Seller's going to pay for that always, in my mind, right? So I'm going to do that. Again, if it's multiple offers, then that's totally different. But we'd want to know if there are any, how much is it? Here on this change of ownership, gosh, if it's only $100 or $200 or $300, that's nothing. But pay for it. But when it's in those percentages, Daybreak is another one that's 0.5%. There's a lot of all edge communities are 0.5%. There's some in Park City lots that are half. I think even some that go up to 1% of the purchase price, and then some other ones are like a 0.25%. So my neighborhood, we were at 300, and we just changed our HOA like from the builder over to, or the developer over to the HOA company. And during that process, the new HOA board decided to raise it from 300 to 0.25%. And I was like, wait, what? I don't remember seeing a notice for that, but they did it. Okay, so that's something you need to know. Or are we going to split it equally? Okay, we also need to know agency. Who are we representing? Now, here's the thing. Dean does not allow you to represent the buyer and the seller, okay? Even though it is allowed in the state, there are just too many things that can go wrong in a limited agency. So what you would do, what we've done is some options you can do here. So if you're the seller and a buyer comes unrepresented, you could have them fill out you'd have to fill out a form that I can't remember the name of it. I'll look it up here in a minute. I think it's unrepresentation form. First, unrepresented buyer form. You would need to go with that, or you could refer it to another agent in the office, or if you have a team, you could refer it to another person on the team. And then like one of my friends, she refers a lot to a specific person and she gets 25% referral for giving it to them. Or, hey, it's my lead, you wouldn't have this deal anyway. You could negotiate whatever that referral is. They're just in charge of having their own representation. Can we do limited agency between the broker? Yes. So I represent the seller. Heather, also at Westfield, represents the buyer. We're both at Westfield. So Dean, you'd have to fill out the limited agency agreement for just the broker. So there's some things that you would click on there, and it says that the buyer and seller have their own representation, but the broker is limited. That is okay. You just can't have one agent, the same agent, representing both sides of the deal. Okay. All right, going on. Okay, some other important things that we need to know as we're filling this out. And again, this kind of goes back to whatever market that we're in. In this market that we're in right now, we're probably not going to select unless it's in the lower priced units that are getting multiple offers. But due diligence condition, is the property conditioned on due diligence? Okay, if you select is, then they have until the due diligence deadline to get their earnest money back. If you say no, it is not, then it's not contingent upon the due diligence. Then you need to specify when that earnest money is going to go non-refundable. Okay, same here. For the appraisal, is it subject to an appraisal? If it's all cash, most of the time you don't put this. You would say, no, it's not, because you're not going to get an appraisal, usually with cash. In the market that we had, during the pandemic, many people were waiving the appraisal condition. They were still had the right to get an appraisal, but it didn't matter if it appraised or not. They had to bring in the cash to cover whatever the difference was. So if a house appraises at $500,000, but you offered $550,000, then the buyer is responsible for bringing in $50,000 cash to pay that appraisal gap from the appraisal to the purchase price. So we have another form for this. If you're going to do this, we're in that type of market, then we created this form during, I think, the brokerage did this form during the pandemic when it was, off the wall crazy, because we wanted to make sure that the buyers understood what they were doing. So we have another form that just spells out what it means to waive a due diligence, what it means to waive the appraisal condition. Okay, is financing required? So you need to click these buttons. Okay, this one right here, BI, this is in section 8.3 BI. So this is the section where you can, your earnest money generally goes non-refundable. Well, it can be refunded for finance and an appraisal, right? But at this, right after due diligence, you can say your earnest money that we put is $5,000. We could say in this section, okay, we're through our due diligence. We're going to give you as non-refundable $2,500 of the due diligence. Of the earnest money. Non-refundable, and it can be released to you. We're that confident that we're going to get our financing. So we're going to release the money to you. Sometimes you need to do that. If it's a competitive market, you might need to do that. Normally I just put 0 because we're not going to release any money. But again, we have to be aware of the competition what market we're in. Okay. Okay, then here's another box that we need to know. All right, so if the Rep C has not been previously counseled by the buyer as provided in sections 8.1, 8.2, and 8.3, so that is your due diligence, your financing, and appraisal, then no later than the due diligence deadline or the financing appraisal, whichever is later, the buyer will or will not deliver an additional earnest money deposit. So you could say, okay, my original earnest deposit is $5,000 and I'm going to pay an additional $2,500. So I'm going to up it to $7,500. This is where you could do that. Now, again, I probably wouldn't do this unless I'm competing with a bunch of agents. Okay, so this would be a place where so usually I put will not and I put 0. Okay, then we go to the addenda section. All right, this is why it's important to know if we're going to do an FHA or VA loan. So there are or are not addenda incorporated into the reference or into the Rep C. All right, so addendum, we're going to do, so we have more than one addendum. So we need to say all of the addenda that are with or incorporated with the offer. So we have 01 and 02. Okay, plus we have a finance or an FHA addendum. Okay, now here's another point. Are we going to ask the seller to include and pay for a home warranty? Home warranties cost anywhere, I would say the average home warranty costs about $500. That's going to give you the basics of everything that you possibly need. Now, if it's a luxury home, larger than 5,000 square feet, you're going to need to talk to the home warranty company and find out how much is the home warranty going to be to cover this house. So, for example, the house that I have a client under for 1.3 million, I had to call Corey over at Elevate, and I said, okay, we've got a 7,500 square foot home. It's listed at, or we're buying it for 1.3. How much is the home warranty going to be on this house? He calculated it all up, and with all the things that we wanted to include in it, it was like $1,300. So I need to make sure that the seller, if we want the seller to pay for it, I need to make sure that I've called Corey in advance to make sure that that's, I can't just put 500 in, or else the buyers are going to be left paying the difference, or you are. So you need to make sure. Okay, as for home warranty companies, we have some really good ones in the state that are locally owned, and I would highly suggest looking into those. So the ones that I think come to our brokerage all the time are Elevate, Ibex, and Silverback. So you want to talk to all three of them and find out, what they offer. Something to consider when you are purchasing a home warranty is whether or not there is a 30-day seasoning of title. What that means is there's a lot of home warranty companies out there that they don't cover anything that breaks between the time of sale and 30 days after. There are a couple home warranty companies, and there are local ones that do cover this. So I know that Elevate and Ibex cover that 30-day window. I'm not sure about Silverback, so that's something to look into. So I always recommend my clients go to one of those companies because they have a really good service plan.
Is that something that they're going to automatically do, or do you have to ask for that special? Yeah.
So Elevate and Ibex automatically cover that. I know. I'm not sure about Silverback. The other companies, you need to do your research and due diligence to find out if they cover that or not. And you'd think, 30 days isn't a big deal. But guess what? I have had clients who move into a house and the very next day they have water everywhere in the laundry room because they either A, didn't hook up the washer and dryer correctly, which is usually the problem, or like they have old, every time you hook up a washer, you need to get a new set of the attachment pipes, whatever they are, whatever they're called, because I don't know why, they just say that. They just like are faulty if you put it on, and if you use an old set, it always leaks, seems like. So this was actually a property that my brother-in-law purchased in Vineyard, and I gave him the companies. I said, these are the people who you need to hire, who you need to, select as your home warranty. And he's like, I'm going to do what, because I know more than you, even though he lives in Nevada and I live here. And so he went off of another company where he thought he could get a little better deal. And guess what? They had a water leak and it wasn't covered. So they were responsible for that. So that really sucked. But let me tell you what happened. I called Corey at Elevate and I said, Corey, this is what happened. And he said to me, hey, Courtney, if you cancel the home warranty, because it was literally one day after the purchase, and if you cancel that home warranty, have the title company cancel it and reorder with Elevate, we'll cover it for you. That's how amazing. That's why it's good to know the people and get to develop relationships with different people, and why local is so good, because we can develop a relationship with Corey. We can develop a relationship with Adam at Ibex, and I'm forgetting the other guy's name at Silverback, but he's really cool too. Is that it? Yeah, I think so. He's pretty cool dude too.
What is the other Ibex?
Ibex, IBEX. Yeah, they have a goat for they're the goat of home warranties, I guess. Okay. Okay, so here's another point of mediation. So this is one where I believe Dean wants us to select shall. So if ever there is a dispute, then we want to go to mediation before we go to straight to a lawsuit. So this is one that we always want to select. And then have our contract deadlines. And then here's section 25. And this is where a lot of people get confused. Okay, offer and time for acceptance. Buyer offers to purchase the property on the above terms and conditions. If seller does not accept this offer by, say we're going to accept an offer or we're going to submit an offer today, we're going to give them 24 hours. Well, we're going to give them till 5 p.m. tomorrow, which is March 21st. Okay, this means that they have till 5 p.m. tomorrow to accept. Accept. That's really important. It is not, if we're going to counter, we can go beyond this deadline. We don't have to do it before. Okay, so it's a lot of people get confused and they think that the offer has a deadline. No, the acceptance deadline is at 5. So you can counter after 5 p.m. Now, should you just like not communicate with the other agent and just let things lapse and then work on something? No, you need to be communicating with the other agent so they know, hey, we are going to be sending over a counter. I'm not going to get it to you by 5 p.m. So just so you know. And they're like, oh, okay, great. Everything is time is of the essence. The time is of the essence. But this is time for acceptance. Okay. All right. So a couple of the forms that we talked about, are there any questions with the offer? Anything that we're missing? Okay. So if we have to do an addendum, here's something that's important to know. All right. So if your offer has included a Rep C, an addendum 1, a finance addendum, and then, so there's 3 documents that are included as the Rep C. All 3 documents are considered the offer. Okay. Now you submit this to the seller. The seller says, I'm going to counter. When they counter, they have to counter all 3 documents. Okay. So you have to have them sign offer, addendum 1, addendum 2, and click the button at the bottom of all 3 documents right here. Right here, counter offer. You're going to counter. And you have to select. Okay, so we had an addendum 1, an addendum 2, and the offer, right? So we're going to counter with addendum 3. Okay, so we're going to put addendum 3 in, and then on the addendum 1, we're going to counter with addendum 3. On addendum 2, we're going to counter with addendum 3. And they have to sign all of those documents when you get it, send it back. You're not just countering 1, you're countering all 3. Because the first original 3 documents are considered the offer. Okay, so all right, so we go to our forms, a couple of the documents that we mentioned. I would highly suggest that you go and take the class at the Board of Realtors. There's a class on the forms. They will go over every single form with you and what they're used for. You as an agent are responsible to know your forms. The more knowledgeable you are on what forms you can use, the better of an agent you will be. Okay, so find out when that course will be offered, whether at the Salt Lake Board or at the UCAR, and find out when they're doing it and go take it. Because there's like, how many documents? 80 something? 87, 82, 85, I don't know. There's a lot. Okay. Now, I would say that I have not used every document on the MLS, but there are a few that we do use all the time. And those are, okay. So for the listing, I use this. You do have to do this lead paint disclosure if it's prior to 1978. So you need to be aware of this, and you need to know how to fill it out. So this one basically is just, hey, this house was built before 1978. I don't know if you either know or you don't know whether there's lead, okay? So the seller has to acknowledge this. Seller, known lead-based paint, or seller has no knowledge. A lot of times sellers don't have knowledge because, I mean, it's 2023 and how many owners have gone through the process before, them? Or sometimes people have picked it up in a foreclosure sale or something where they're not going to know any information about the house. So records and reports available. So if you have any records, then you need to provide them, or I have no reports, okay? So you need to know this form. That's one. Other forms, you're always, so you need to know your seller's property disclosure, condition disclosure form. Okay, every seller has to fill this out. Every buyer needs to agree. Now, unless you have put into an addendum that there's going to be no seller's property disclosures, they're buying it as is, then you don't need to provide those. Builders, for example, aren't going to provide a seller's property disclosure because the house hasn't been built. There has been no issues.
I'm a little OCD, I just. with them.
Okay.
It's 99 plus 9, so there's, well.
So they've added some docs. There's 99 plus 9. Ben's OCD, and he needed to know. 108.
There's 9 commercial forms, there's 1 appraiser forms, there's like, I don't know, 8 or 9 leasing forms. Or five leasing forms. Couple of real estate.
Yeah. Okay, let's see. So the selling ones, the addendum to real estate purchase contract, we use this a lot. And so here's some things that you can do with the addendum. So over here, which is cool, if you don't want to have like a closing cost addendum, a COVID addendum, an appraisal addendum, you can actually, so all these addenda that are in this column right here can actually be added like a condensed version to a regular addendum. So if I want my client to, so this is an addendum, okay? We're not countering, this is the addendum. This is a part of my original offer. We're gonna ask for closing costs. So you just drag and drop it over onto the side, and then you're gonna load the selected clause. And then it pops up it pops up right here. So you can just fill it in. So if you aren't going to have any other items that you're going to ask for, then you could just do the closing cost addendum because that's the only thing that you're asking for is closing costs. But if you're going to ask for additional items, then you don't need to do a closing cost addendum plus asking for some other things. So this one is, let's see, what's something that we're going to ask for?
HOA transfer.
Well, that's already in addition to that, what are some things that people have asked for before? Include the chicken coop and chickens. Okay, and we're going to ask for $10,000 of closing costs. Now, if this is it, we're a conventional offer, then this is all you would have to do. Your regular offer plus addendum 1, okay? But what if we're gonna do a VA or FHA? So in that case, I'm not gonna include the closing cost addendum because the FHA addendum has a place for closing costs. Okay, so I would just put addendum 1, we're asking for the chicken coop and chickens. And this acceptance deadline needs to be the same as what's on the REPC, right? And then if you're gonna counter, you're gonna counter that with whatever the addendum number is, you gotta put that in. Okay, so we go to forms. If they are an FHA or VA buyer, right here. You have to check the applicable box. What type of loan is it? It's an FHA loan. Okay, so the reason why it's important to put one is the sellers are going to want to know what type of loan it's going to be, because there's some different things that you have to look for with each. With a VA loan, I believe the maximum amount of closing costs that a VA loan can cover is 6%. So the seller can, or the buyer can ask for 6% of closing costs. That's quite a bit of money, and that is acceptable on a VA loan. But we're gonna say it's an FHA loan right now. And so we get to this point, and there are some boxes here. Seller shall make any and all appraisal required repairs, provided that the cost does not exceed X amount of money. So I always put in like $1,000. Now, granted, if this were a competitive market where we're going up against a bunch of different buyers, then we may put this at 0. But there are certain repairs that, in order for the seller to even sell the house, they have to do. And so those would be a part of the appraisal. So for example, so even though I didn't get licensed until 2012, Ben had his real estate license long before that. And we were doing investments during the 2007 to 2010 period of time. And Ben also at that time had he had another company that was affiliated with his construction company, where he basically did the repairs for, and he secured the bank-owned properties. So he'd get called out for a few of these repairs. Yeah, it's called like property preservation, basically. So if, banks need to have certain vendors locally that they can call on to go and do these repairs. So a few of the types of repairs that, these are usually like safety issues, right? So like if a pool's been drained, you've got to board it up. If the railing is missing, then you have to put railing on. So they can't sell the home without some of these things done. It's certain electrical, like if there's exposed wires or different things, they have to cover those and that kind of stuff. I think one house, garbage disposal wasn't working, winterization on the home. Anyway, anything that's kind of like a safety hazard, the appraiser may or may not call out. And also a certain age of a home sometimes may not be able to be funded FHA because there's too many things that are wrong with the house that you just need to sell it to an investor who can come in and rehab the whole house. And in that case, they'd be buying it cash. Okay, so I usually do $1,000 here. Okay, another thing that's called out for FHA or VA is pest control report. And I usually put up to $300, but a lot of times your home inspection company can do the pest control inspection on top of it, and it may not cost $300. Like one sale we just recently had in Saratoga, the home's like, how old was the home? 6 or 7 years old, is being purchased by a VA buyer. And so they called out the pest, and so the home inspector just added that on as a service, and it was only like $89. So we said we'd pay up to $300 for that, but we only had to pay $89. So that was pretty cool. Okay, and then seller shall contribute at settlement an amount to be applied to the buyer's discretion. So this is closing costs. So if you're going VA or FHA, then you don't need to have the closing costs to your other addendum. You add it right here to your VA addendum. So we're asking for $10,000, right? Okay. Okay, so we've written the offer. We've asked our client all of the important things that we have to fill out. You know, how much do we want to offer? How much earnest money do you want? What are the dates that we want? Do you have a contingency? What's your possession? You know, the other things were, are we contingent upon due diligence and appraisal? Do you need financing, right? So all those things are important. And then the other thing is who's going to pay for the HOA transfer? Those are usually the main points that I'm going to talk to my client about before we even write the offer. So that it's easy, I just have to go back to my office and fill it out, send it over DocuSign, boom, boom, we're done. Okay, those are the most common addenda that we use. But like as we were saying, sometimes there's for sale by owner. So you're representing a buyer, the home that your client wants to purchase is one that they found on KSL that's not listed with an agent. Well, you have to get paid on that. You want to get paid on that. So you'd want to fill out the for sale by owner commission agreement. There's an addendum. Okay, here's another point that we need to talk about, personal property. So if we're including furniture, things that are personal property in the home that are staying, then we need to fill out a separate bill of sale for those items because underwriters do not like to see furniture on the REPC. If you do have it on the REPC, then you say couch worth $0. We're including a couch worth $0 because the appraiser doesn't want to, or the underwriter does not like that. So anything that you're transferring and you're purchasing. So like, for example, when Ben and I bought the model home, it was fully furnished and we went in the house, and as part of the sale were the bookcases, which we had to fill out a separate bill of sale later that said $0 for the bookcases because they were part of the sale, right? But anything else that we wanted, like we really like this rug. Give me half this bedroom set. Oh, we really like this table and chairs. So on the separate bill of sale, we had all of the prices written out separately, and then we paid for those at closing separately. We just like Venmo'd at closing. Here's $2,500 for the extra furniture that we wanted. And that's not a part of the regular sale. That's a part of the, it says purchase outside of the sale. Okay, here's one that comes up a lot. The resolution of due diligence addendum. So you're under contract, you have your home inspection, you have a list of repairs that you want finished. So what I usually do is I write up the list of repairs. Depending on what my client is okay with, I will either send the whole inspection report or I'll just take screenshots of the sections that apply to the items that we need a repair for. And I'll send that all over to the listing agent and we'll say, okay, we had the home inspection, there's these items. We either want these fixed, and this is the time when you would talk to your client, do you want them fixed or do you want cash? And you'll just take care of them later. Kind of depends on how serious the item is and how important it is to them. So what you could put that line out and say, well, all these fixed, or at the bottom, you could say, if the seller doesn't want to do these and we want them to pay $3,000 to closing costs. The reason, now here's the section. Okay, you have three options. The seller and a buyer can agree to the seller paying money towards closing costs in lieu of repairs. They can reduce the purchase price in lieu of repairs, or they can repair the items. Now, if I am counseling my buyer, I'm going to counsel them to take the closing costs over the price reduction, because the closing cost is hard money that, like if their closing costs are $10,000 and there's $3,000 worth of repairs, originally the buyer had to come to closing with $10,000 out of pocket, right? Well, if we say we want those $3,000 to be credited towards closing costs, now my client only has to come in with $7,000. They've saved the $3,000. So now when they close, they can do those repairs, right? It's like just saving your client money up front. If you want it to be purchase price, really that only helps the buyer, a tiny bit of money. Like what's $3,000 going to do to your mortgage payment? It's like $5, right? Over the course of forever. So most buyers want more cash in their pocket because there's things that they want to do when they move into the house always. Either they want to get new carpet, they want to paint, they want to put in a yard or whatever. So that's money that can go towards that. Okay. Or if the sellers are like, I'll just take care of the repairs. Then after you've agreed upon which ones they'll do, then we fill out this form and we put in the items that they're gonna repair. Okay, so what happens if they don't finish the repairs? Okay, so then you have some options. The buyer may cancel the REPC, and in addition to the return of earnest money deposit or deposits, if applicable, accept from the seller as liquidated damages a sum equal to the earnest money deposit. Boy, that's hardcore. Or the buyer may complete the purchase of the property and then pursue any other remedies available at law after closing. So you'd really have to look at those items and say, how important are these items to you to be finished? Is it going to make or break the sale for you? If it's going to make or break the sale, then you would click that one. If they're like, if they don't complete X, Y, Z, then we'll just go ahead and close and we can, try to get them to, to complete it. And then this is the other thing. If, say, the due diligence deadline, if you fill this out way prior to the buyer due diligence, then you can select whether it's not waived or not, because what if they don't agree, or you've agreed, okay, the deadline's on the 20th, you've had your inspection and you've all come to a resolution on, say, the 18th, but the due diligence deadline is still the 20th. And between the 18th and the 20th, they're like, you know what? There's just too many things wrong with this house. Even though we've come to an agreement and they said they'll fix them, I don't want to buy the house. So I definitely would not click this button for coming to an agreement before the due diligence deadline, so that if they decide they want to cancel, they still can. Okay, so that's another one that you need. Okay, so let me go to is it possible for me to access it? All right, those are probably the most common ones that we use. Yeah, but again, I recommend going to the forms class, learning all about all the forms. Okay, any questions up to this point? We've talked about, okay, this is how we write up an offer. This is how we do all that. But now what? What do I do after I've written the offer? Okay, so before you submit the offer, or right after you submit the offer, you're gonna call the agent and you're gonna talk to them about it. So there's a script, and that's what I'm trying to find. I think I'm gonna have to log out of, oh wait, I could email Hunter. Is that who this is?
Yeah.
Agent services. Okay. Let me email this over. Okay. So is there anyone on the pro team? Because if you're on the pro team, then the scripts are generally in. But if they're not, then I can make a copy of just this one page and I can email it out to whoever wants it. What am I doing? Gmail. Oh, wow. Okay. So we have some scripts. Okay. So if you're on a team, they probably already have a checklist for you, or they might have scripts. If they don't, then we can just send over our checklist to you. If you're on the pro team, then you've received these scripts or similar scripts already. So when I'm working with my client, I want to make contact with their lender. I want to make contact with the other agent if we're going to be submitting an offer on behalf of my client. And these are some of the things that you could say. So if they haven't gotten a pre-approval, or even if they have, I want to know how much money did they plan to put down? What's their budget? Can they buy a house or property in an HOA? Because usually when you get your pre-approval, it doesn't account for the HOA. So if they're approved at, say, $400,000, that would be $400,000 for a property not in an HOA. So if the HOA payment is $100 or $200, how is that going to affect their qualification? So we need to have that conversation with the lender to know what amount that, or you could just take a screenshot if you want. That works too, or a picture. Okay, can you pay cash above appraisal? So we talked about this appraisal gap a little bit, but what that means is when you get an appraisal, when you're purchasing a home and you get an appraisal, the bank says they will only lend on the appraised value or less. If the property comes in over appraised value, the bank will only pay appraised value. So what do you do if it's over appraised value? There's a $20,000 or $30,000 or $50,000 gap. Well, in the competitive market, the buyers were saying, well, I'll just pay it. I'll just bring in extra cash. I don't know where all these people had all this extra cash, but somehow,
It all dried up.
I know, right? Everybody had all this cash during the boom, but now that, interest rates are up and, nobody has cash anymore. So where'd it go? But anyway, during that time period, the buyers would oftentimes just say, I'll pay either the whole amount or I'll pay X amount over. So a lot of times in our offers, it was like, we'll pay $10,000 over appraised value, or we'll pay up to $20,000 appraised value, or we'll pay the full gap, whatever that is. I had a client who put an offer on a house and he said he would pay whatever the gap was. And oh my gosh, I was so worried because he came in, I think like 80,000 or something over what they were asking. So he would have had to pay $80,000 in appraisal gap if it came in at what they were asking versus what we purchased at. Thanks the Lord, it came in at a little over what we offered. So he didn't have to pay any appraisal gap, but he was prepared that if the house, it was listed at $750 and he bought it like for $840 or something like that. Anyway, he was prepared. Okay, so I need to know all these things. How much does my client need for closing costs? So that's a question that you need to ask the lender. How much do they need? Because we need to know if they have the money or if they're going to need the sellers to pay. So this is a very important thing right now in our climate, real estate market climate, because a lot of buyers are wanting to do the 2-1 buy down. To do the 2-1 buy down, the seller needs to pay some closing costs. So we need to ask the lender, how much is the 2-1 buy down going to cost? So that when we go to the sellers, we have a number in hand. So, you know, that could be $10,000, it could be $20,000, $50,000, whatever. We need to know what that number is. Okay, and then asking the lender, how quickly can you close? We need to have that conversation with their lender. So any of these, oh, here's another good one too. Can you send the client through underwriting so we can close faster once we have an accepted offer? So a lot of lenders will send them through underwriting before they have a house under contract, and that would speed up the process significantly. And the reason why we were able to get that one deal I told you closed in 7 days is because they had gone with another lender. They had all of their docs gathered and in place, and it failed with the other lender, so we had to switch lenders. But they had everything together. They had the whole package ready to just go plop, and we were able to transfer the appraisal too. So that helped. All right. Call the listing agent before showing on a hot property. So if you're in a price point where there's a good chance it's either already sold or you expect multiple offers, then you want to call the agents before you go and look at the house just to get some information out of them. What are the seller's circumstances? Do they need a lease back or a longer close? Are there any special features that might not be apparent at first glance? I have a house listed and one of the bedrooms upstairs is an ensuite. The bathroom, if you're looking in, like here's the door, here's the room, the bathroom's right here. So if you just peek in the room, you might miss the ensuite. And I think that's a pretty important detail. So it'd be important to put a little plaque on the door. Ensuite, check out the bathroom, you know, do that. Would clients accept a competitive offer before the weekend? So we get that a lot sometimes when it's a really competitive, you want to try to get an offer in and them to offer or accept it before the weekend craziness. Okay, then we're going to show the property. We're going to call the listing agent before we write the offer. Some questions you can ask the offer. Are there any current, or ask the agent, are there any current offers? If yes, great. Now I just want to make sure that we're putting our best foot forward. When writing up our offer, can you share some of the details of your current offers? They may or may not be able to share. They have to get the permission from their client to be able to share any information. When are you showing the offers to your client? Obviously, price is important. On top of that, what else is important to them? So you'll want to think about how you're going to structure the offer if it's a competitive market. Maybe you're going to put a larger earnest money down. Cash offers are great, but they won't necessarily win the day if the terms aren't as good. So that's something to consider. If you're putting in an offer that is well over list price or well under list price, then you need to have comps to justify both. Like I would say if you're going to submit an offer well below list price, then you want to have supporting comps to say, hey, look, this is the comps. Like you're way off your rocker. Like, you know, you have to be able to prove it why you're coming in. Otherwise, there's no reason to lower the price, you know? So you have to come in with data. Okay. Another checklist, who's going to pay the HOA? Is any earnest money going to be non-refundable? How much is that going to be? We talked about that. Will there be any additional deposits? We talked about that. Are there any necessary addenda? FHA, leaseback, appraisal floor, escalation clause, disclosure of interest, limited agency. So disclosure of interest form is whether, like, so if I am selling a property, my own personal property, I would need to disclose that I'm an agent. that's your disclosure of interest. Your escalation clause, what this means is there's not really an addendum online for this. You have to go with what either your team says to write, or Dean has a few structure of how you write that. So what that is you're going to have competing offers and you say, I'm going to pay $1,000 over the next competing offer and not to exceed X purchase price. So that's an escalation. So we're not going to give them an exact number. We're just going to say, hey, we're going to pay $1,000 over the next highest offer. And you can have a limit on that, or you could have no limit and just be like, whatever it comes in at, I'll pay $1,000 over. Now, do you have to accept that if they come to you at the end and say, hey, that we're listed at 500, the next, the highest offer is at 585. You said you'd pay $1,000 over at 586. Do you want it? You have an opportunity at that moment to say yes or no. If you don't want it, then they can go with the other offer. But at least you have that option to make the choice. Okay. Oh, you guys, I was wrong. Wait, what? I thought it was shall. My checklist says me at the option. Will there be a home warranty? Seller's disclosures. Okay. Type the offer on the MLS. I like to type the offer on the MLS. Okay. Here's something that's really important. When you are writing up an offer, it is very important to check for typos. You want to also make sure that you fill in every box, everything. If there's not something that applies, put NA, right? When I receive an offer from somebody and there's mistakes all over the place, my opinion of you as an agent has significantly decreased. Okay, you are not a credible agent to me. Therefore, we are not going to go with your offer. We're going to go with this offer. That everything is correct. Okay, so it matters. You know, being detail oriented in this process matters. Okay, when you send over an email, and your team might already have, they might already have a format for your email, but here's one that this is just kind of a rough, like I usually add a little bit more fluff, but here's my client's outstanding offer for your client. My assistant is on this email. Please include her in all the communication. We look forward to working with you and your client. I like to puff up my lender a little bit who we're using, and you know, they've been well qualified with so-and-so. He's been in the business for 20 years. The #1 lender for Security National or whatever. Then I do a quick breakdown of the important details that they're going to want to know. And then please confirm receipt of this offer. Thanks so much. I look forward to potentially working with you. Some other offer ideas: if the home's newer, you won't ask for repairs or okay, so if it's a competitive offer, you could say if the house was built in the last 5 years, like there's probably not going to be many major issues with the house. So you could just say that you want to reserve the right to have inspection, but the buyer will not ask for any repairs. And that people like that. Some other things that you could do: pay seller's title fees, it's the HOA in a competitive offer situation, pre-schedule your inspection, tighten up your deadlines, commit lender to ordering the appraisal 24 to 48 hours after it goes under contract. Anyway, here's an example of an escalation clause. Here's an example of an appraisal gap that you could use. There's also the appraisal addendum, which Dean really prefers that we just use the appraisal addendum. But I would, if you're on a team, I would suggest talking to your team and saying, what forms or what format do we have for this? What language do you want me to use for the email? What language do you want me to use for all of these clauses that you could add in? Because everybody does it slightly different, but the same. Anyway, any questions? That's a lot of information.
Yeah.
I don't know. I hope that you learned something. Yeah. Anyway.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any other? Are we good? The people on Zoom are like, we're checked out.
There's 6 there.
It's just information you have to know. So,
It is. And you know, it's funny because,
fun or not fun,
right. No matter like one of our new agents, I was like helping her write an offer the other day and going through the whole thing. And no matter, she had done a couple of the what are they called? The case studies. And she's like, she didn't really learn anything from that because it wasn't real.
Yeah.
And so she wasn't like retaining it or didn't think it was as important or whatever, you know? And then when we were right in it, she was like, oh, that's how you do it. And all the things. And I did forget back in command, once you have it in, once it's your offers in, let's see. I made a mistake and put that one under. Okay, but say we're under contract. We got to go to our DocuSign. So you're going to want to. So over here, when you're starting a new file, it will say start transaction. When you've already opened it on DocuSign, you can go to transactions. So it'll open up your DocuSign, log in, you can do your DocuSign. I know. Need a whole training on command. Thank you. So you're Clay's assistant, is that what you're doing?
Yes.
Oh, that's awesome. Good for you. He's so awesome to learn and work with. So you're lucky. So good. See ya.